Welcome back to Brain, sponsored by Toro and Tides. March is Brain Injury Awareness Month, and to honor the importance of this month, Brain to Brain is shifting to weekly Friday drops in addition to our Tuesday Talks episode. So you're getting two episodes each week for Brain Injury Awareness Month. These Friday Talks will feature leading voices in medicine, advocacy, and lived experience. Now, today's conversation is about walking through something no parent ever prepares for. I'm sitting down with Tim Siegel. He's the executive director of Team Luke Hope for the Minds, a nonprofit that supports children after brain injury. But before the title, he's a dad. After his son Luke suffered a severe brain injury, Tim stepped into a journey that changed everything. One that would eventually shape the work he's doing now to support families across the country. Tim, I'm so grateful that you're here today.
Thank you so much, Evan, for having me. I really appreciate it.
So let's just start at the beginning, Tim. Walk us through that horrific day where your life and your son's life ultimately changed.
Well, I was the tennis coach at Texas Tech for 23 years and decided to resign on July 8th of 2015 so that I could spend more time with my family. At the time, I had an older daughter from a previous marriage and then three young children, a 12-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old daughter, and a 9-year-old son. And 20 days later, I got a phone call that no father ever wants to receive, that my son was in a golf cart accident. On July 28th, 2015, I was coaching tennis at a high school not far from where I live. I got the phone call at 2 p.m. from a father saying that my son was in a golf cart accident at their house. So I rushed over to the scene and knew right away that this was not going to be a good situation. The ambulance was just taking off. The helicopter was hovering above, and then got to the hospital and followed the ambulance. Got to the hospital, and about 5 minutes after I arrived, I was told that the golf cart that Luke was on, he was 9, landed on top of his chest, and he suffered head and chest trauma, and was in cardiac arrest for 7 minutes. And so, at the time, I just had this, maybe I was naive, but I just had this feeling that Luke was going to do better than what we were told. My wife at the time, she's a nurse practitioner, and she knew that the fact that Luke had lost oxygen didn't make a lot of sense because apparently Luke had spoken at the scene. But he did lose oxygen, and so that's, of course, what made his recovery so much more challenging. So for the next 44 days, we were in Lubbock. Many surgeries later, we were then transferred to Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth, where we spent four very long months. But I'll just share this one thing, that on September 15th at Cook Children's, 5 days after we arrived, the neurologist said, "I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but based on Luke's MRI, he will never use his limbs, use his voice, and should never open his eyes." And as he left the room, my wife, I'm trying to console her, and I'm in shock. And that's really where it really hit us. And that was sort of the beginning of the new life for us. We spent 4 months at Cook Children's, and then we came home on January 6th of 2016. So 5 months we spent in two different hospitals.
Oh my God. I first and foremost, I'm so sorry for what happened to your son and this experience that you had to go through. Um, you know, Me being on the other end of it with the brain injury, obviously every brain injury is different, but I have heard from my mom that helpless feeling. I was on a ventilator for 2 days. Obviously, again, much different than your son's situation, but speak to the gravity of that. The unknown. You had mentioned that as well, where there's no roadmap for this, and you see your son in such a vulnerable state that so many parents see throughout the numbers, these statistics of brain injuries worldwide, and children as well. um, I mean, put us in your shoes that day. I know you did a little bit, but what was running through your mind?
I just remember talking to someone saying that if Luke can respond to one command, I'll take care of the rest. He was nonverbal. He really had no, I didn't know if Luke, how much Luke was in there. And I just felt in my heart of hearts that he would understand that somehow, some way, we're from New Orleans and we're big New Orleans Saints fans. And we'd reached out to the Saints and Drew Brees had sent Luke a video. And I played that video over and over and over and over, thinking that that's the one thing he would love to hear. But one thing that did happen late in our stay at Cook Children's is he made his first sound. So I did feel like, okay, we're going to make a little bit of progress. But for me, I was so, I don't know what the word is really, I was so shocked by what I was told that what Luke was not going to do, that my focus though was on what Luke may do and what I'm going to help him do. And so I learned how to change a trach. I learned all of his meds. I learned everything that I could possibly learn so that when I came back to Lubbock, I became Luke's primary caregiver. And at that time, really from January 6th of 2016 until late in 2021, I was his night nurse 5 nights a week. I took Luke to PT, OT, and speech, eventually took him to do some alternative therapy, such as stem cell, laser therapy, and hyperbaric oxygen. We would get on an airplane and we would travel to New Orleans to watch the Saints play a number of times. Although Luke was nonverbal, I just knew Luke understood. And about a year after the accident, a little bit more than a year after the accident, I always thought when I would say Luke blink if that Luke was blinking, but was really that Luke blinking or what did he have to blink? Well, what happened was the Saints were about to play a game, and I stopped in the room with Luke, and I said, Luke, the Saints are playing Denver today. Move your tongue if you think we're going to win. And he began to move his tongue. And that was the first time, probably a good 15 months after the accident,
Mm.
that I knew Luke understood, that Luke knew exactly what I was talking about. And from that point on, we had this special bond, this special relationship, that I would eventually say, Luke, do you want to listen to Bruce Springsteen, Dad's favorite music? And he wouldn't move his tongue. You want to listen to Ed Sheeran? And he would move his tongue. Do you want to go from the chair to the bed? And he would move his tongue. So, and then it even became even greater. And I would say, Luke, can I hear your voice? And he would make a sound. And then
Mm.
I would say things like, Luke, I love you. And he would say, So he would respond. And I was just so convinced that Luke was going to speak. So he did make a tremendous amount of progress through therapies. And I'm sure you know this, that the greatest therapy that Luke received was love from his family and certainly from me, because I was with Luke basically 24 hours a day.
Mm. I watched that you sent a phenomenal clip to me, and I was going to get to him speaking to you with his tongue, and it's a beautiful moment where it's so eager to use his tongue with simple questions that you were sending to him, and it was truly encouraging to see that. Also heartbreaking as well because you compared that to the videos you saw pre-brain injury. And I do want to explain this to our audience just briefly. He had an anoxic brain injury because it was the lack of oxygen during those 7 minutes that his brain was unable to receive. That's what the doctors diagnosed him with, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And the next question is, I guess it's a statement. You have these doctors, that doctor that just took all the air out of your balloon, saying he's never going to respond. He's never going to use his limbs again. And then, by God, 18 months in, he's using his tongue to communicate with you. Speak to that, where a lot of these families will get certain diagnosis. Certain doctors will tell them something. I was told when I was in a coma, excuse me, my mom was told when I was in a coma, he'll be out of the hospital in 3 days. I was in a coma for 2 days. They say these things, either they're over promising or under promising. Speak to that, to those families that are told these certain things. Maybe it's hope. What's that message you want to share to them?
Well, you mentioned under promising. I think in all the families that we've helped, and I certainly look forward to talking to you about what we do. But, we were even asked early on, do we want to continue?
Mm.
And I said, what do you mean continue? And then what I also found out is the two neurosurgeons that worked on Luke had, of course, a major brain bleed, and then he had one later as well. That the doctors both told me that they were convinced that Luke was not going to make it past the first 2 weeks that he was in the hospital. And so I think that most of these neurosurgeons, these neurologists, they work with the children prior to their leaving the hospital. But once they leave the hospital, they don't know what we're doing,
Mhm.
from the therapies, from the love of the parents to you name it. And so that's why I would say to every parent that there is hope. The brain can rewire, and Luke's brain was globally damaged. You cannot have a more severely brain damaged MRI than what my son had. And yet, we had communication. I knew how Luke was doing based on his eyes. I could tell by just by his demeanor, by his face, by his coloring. And so I just knew that Luke was going to get better. And he did. And so my message to everyone is that, yes, you want to listen to the doctors, but at the same time, there's a baseline. The MRI was a baseline. For me, I didn't really care a whole lot about the MRI. I was just so convinced of what I was going to be able to do as a father. And so not only is my message to the parents to never give up hope, but my message to the parents is be involved. Be involved with your child, um, from the love and from being involved in therapies, and not to let your child, whether it's with a nurse, to just to be in bed or in a wheelchair, but to get upright, to be upright and to be moving. And we certainly did that all the time.
Mm. Tim, you say you're a Saints fan. You're truly a saint yourself for what you did to help your son progress while he was still with us. You talk about the involvement that parents and family members should have. I've been to 19 different rehab facilities, physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, the works. And a common case that I see throughout all the patients and the friends that I've made throughout those facilities is where their support system falls short. I myself have lost a brother, extended family where they stop engaging with me. Now, I don't know the true answer, but it's almost like they don't know how to approach the situation. Now, that could be for the brain injury survivor, or it could be, the caregiver like you. Did you notice any change in dynamic by family or extended family where you stopped getting phone calls?
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I felt like, my friends were there for me. Luke's friends were there, and then that did stop. Some of the friends, I would ask them to bring their buddies over so that Luke could hear their voices. Some of the boys were uncomfortable, some were okay, but it was always hard for me, how the parents would come back to me and say, "I'm sorry, but we're so busy this week." As far as my family, certainly I would have loved more out of, let's say, my brothers to be there more for me, because I know what I would have done for them. But what I did learn, though, later on, is that I want to spend less time focusing on what I didn't have and more on what I do have. And that's the close friends, because I did develop a great relationship with different friends over the years after the accident. And so you're going to lose some and you're going to gain some. And that's just the way it is in life in general. And just to kind of further what had happened to Luke. Luke had made some tremendous progress. His tongue movement was quicker. Because I knew Luke so well, taking him to every therapy, I really knew what medicines were working, what medicines we tried to get rid of, all the things that mattered. But I also knew that, I wanted to get Luke out. So we would go to Texas Tech ball games. We would go to different places from New Orleans and traveled by plane quite a lot as well. But we also knew that COVID was out there. And in August of 2021, Luke got COVID. I was convinced, though, that Luke would be fine, because one lung wasn't great, the other one was fine. They sent us home. Because I knew Luke so well, 3 days later, I didn't like what I saw, had to give him some extra breathing treatments, went to the ER. They didn't even put Luke in ICU. They put him in a room. And I went home to get some rest. And I got a knock on my door the next morning at 4 in the morning, get to ICU. On my way to the hospital, I'm at a red light and I hear a voice. You're going to be okay, but Luke's not going to make it.
Mm.
I got to the hospital and the first person that I saw in ICU was the doctor. And she said, I don't know if your son's going to make it. And I said, I know. And Luke passed away a couple of hours later on August 19th, 2021. So for me, I always was convinced that Luke was going to speak. My dreams were only centered around Luke speaking.
Mm.
And so I just knew he was going to speak. But what I do know today is that Luke is speaking. He's just speaking through me. And what also has happened is that, early on after Luke's accident, I knew that I couldn't coach tennis anymore. I was at Texas Tech for 23 years. I was then coaching middle school and high school. That was just impossible for me to continue. But I had a friend of mine say, "Why don't you consider starting a nonprofit?" And I didn't know the first thing, but I said, okay. And so I started the Team Luke Foundation. And then I had a friend of mine reach out to me, or excuse me, someone reach out to me who I'd never met, Rhonda Johnson. She had a nonprofit called Hope for Minds. We got together shortly after. And then in 2018, we combined to form Team Luke Hope for Minds. And our nonprofit supports children all over America. We're in 47 states. We give up to sometimes some years up to $500,000 a year to families. We have support groups online for siblings, for parents, for grieving, for a dad support group. And then we also have what I would consider to be our Super Bowl, which every year in Austin, we have our Making Connections Pediatric Brain Injury Conference. This past October, we had 200 families come from 17 different states. Over 800 people attended the conference. We have keynote speakers. We have a number of vendors and a resource fair. And so we do a lot for families in that regard. We also give money, financial support to families that need our help. So we are doing all that we can to help families. I talk to parents on a regular basis, and my role now, I am the co-founder. I was the executive director, but I'm now the
Mm.
co-founder. And Rhonda Johnson is now the executive director because I felt like in my heart, I needed more balance in my life. And what has happened to me is tennis was out of my life for so long. I competed as a young child at the University of Arkansas on the professional tour, playing all the Grand Slams, all those things that I did. But the last thing Luke and I ever did was play tennis.
Mm.
And so for me, tennis was no longer part of my life. I just could not get back on a tennis court. And I moved to Dallas in May of 2024, coming up on 2 years. And now I'm back playing tennis, back teaching tennis lessons in the afternoon. So I do feel like I'm in a much better place, although sadness is still extremely apparent in my life all the time.
Mhm.
It beats anger and bitterness. And so I'm back on a tennis court, which is a great thing for my heart and my soul.
Mhm. Oh, wow, how beautiful. I mean, you just covered so many things. The foundation that you'll have, the lives that you're impacting, um, Luke's legacy. You say he's speaking through you. He never got to speak to you, with his words. He obviously did with his tongue, but it's beautiful because you talk about the voice that you heard in the car, and you kind of felt it coming, right? The I mean, what an intimate moment to hear that, to know that was coming, but then to have the mindset of, you know what, this is horrific, this is so tragic, but I'm going to do this for Luke. And now you're oh my God, it's beautiful. And what I love even more is you said that sadness is there, but that anger isn't. That sadness is carried by so many of these parents, of these loved ones that are affected by brain injury survivors, or brain injury, people with brain injuries that have passed. What would be your advice? Is it finding something to put your energy into, tennis for you, to cope with the sadness that's going to be persistent? I'd love to hear that.
Well, it took me a while to come to terms with what had happened to Luke, both when I lost him in the way that he was, to then losing him altogether. The grief process is real. I know this. You can't do this alone. I needed my friends and my family for sure. I do have regrets in the way I probably was with my daughters. I was so focused and selfish with my own grief that I didn't think I did a good enough job for them, and I'm making up for lost time now. And I would say that, you know, that lean on people you trust. I do a lot of public speaking all over America, and I have what's called 7 inspirations from Luke. And I share these 7 inspirations. Number one is to find your passion. I lost mine and I've regained mine through my nonprofit. The second is don't ever quit. And that's important for all parents, right? To never quit. Um, and I never quit because my little boy never quit. The third one is to lean on friends and family. And I'm doing that now every day. When I get a message, hey, I'm praying for you, I'm praying for your son, it goes a long way. So I share that with people to never keep things inside. Find people you trust. And also, if you see someone struggling, a simple, hey, how are you? It goes a long way. The fourth one is to make good choices, be careful. Every parent tells their child that. I unfortunately never had a chance to tell that to Luke because I didn't know this family owned the golf cart. Um, I live with that every day, that how can you let 2 9-year-olds on a city street unsupervised? The fifth one is to have faith. You know, my faith in God is very strong. It's been tested every day, but it's also stronger than it's ever been because of what's happened to me. The sixth one, I think, is the most important one for everyone listening, and that is to find forgiveness. I in my mind felt I would never forgive this family. I didn't know how I could, and I finally did. And when that happened, it set me free. I know I have to do this on a regular basis. You don't just do it one time, but that was important. Once I forgave the family, I was able to begin a healing process that really had not taken place at that time, and that took me, a long time. That was Luke's accident was in 2015, and in 2023, 8 years later, is when I forgave the family.
Mm.
And then the seventh one is to let a loved one's legacy live on through you, and I'm doing that every day. But for me, it's not trying. It's very easy to be isolated, and it's very important to surround yourself with a support group, with friends and family, and whether that's professional help, because I've had to go through some professional help, absolutely. Um, and no one, I think, is should have any shame in that, because I know that that's been important in my life. Unfortunately, this situation took a marriage apart. My wife and I had a wonderful marriage, and then we didn't, because she saw what happened to Luke, his injury, as more devastating than his passing. We
Mm.
grieved differently, and we never had that grieving together. We never saw counselors together, which I think would have been a tremendous help for us. But what has happened, though, in our life, in my life, is that Jenny and I still get along very well. I have a great relationship with my 3 daughters. And then ultimately, something very positive happened in my life. In July, I met a wonderful girl who is going through a lot of challenges in her own life. She had a spinal stroke. March 16th will be 17 years,
Mm.
and she's doing quite well. And we actually got engaged in January, and just over the weekend planned our wedding on December 12th, on 12/12. So, for me, every single day there are triggers. I think about my son 24 hours a day,
Mm.
and sometimes it's overwhelming. But for the most part, I'm in a better place because sadness has taken over anger and bitterness.
Mm. This podcast is for everybody. That's why I love hosting this, right? Survivors, caregivers, loved ones. Right now, I'm going to ask for your advice for me, because you talk about letting go of the anger and forgiving. My accident was in July 23rd of 2019, by a truck driver who lost a rear wheel on his semi truck. He didn't inspect his rig correctly. There was a lot of safety violations that should have been checked. And I have so much anger and resent, because I was working for a Fortune 500 company. My life was on the right track. I just closed a 6-figure deal. And now I do have this newfound purpose with this podcast, with my company, Toro and Tides, and the book, but it's I still have that bitterness where it's the what ifs. So and I've been to professional help and counseling, and I don't know if I can ever truly let it go. I know you say you deal with that you battle that on a daily basis. So help me help myself. What would you do? What would you tell me?
Well, letting go is one thing. I think that, I'll just speak for me first, and then I'll speak to you. I knew that in 2021, when Luke passed away, 2022 was a blur. 2023 is when I really went downhill. This is all while trying to run a nonprofit with a staff. And I just struggled so mightily. Therapies, all these things. And once I forgave, despite the fact that I'm not sure how remorseful the family is, but remorse should not dictate whether or not we forgive. Everyone's been told, right, that when you forgive, you're only hurting yourself, not the person, or when you don't forgive. And it's a struggle. It is a struggle. And yet I do know that I have three daughters and four grandchildren. I have some very close friends, and now I will soon have a wife. And so for me, letting go is one thing, but moving forward, I would say that I would use the words moving forward more so than I would say to let something go, because you now have a life. It's different. There's a lot of pain that you deal with, both real pain, physical pain, and then also pain in your heart and your mind. And your path now is different, but God, I believe, is using you in a much more profound way, that you are now able to help so many people. You have a gift when you were in broadcasting that obviously you're showing today with your talents, that you're now able to do in a different way, that this new path that you're leading, I think, can inspire and impact, which I know it already has. I've been told it's impossible to know how many people that I've been impacting. We have a Facebook following. It's called Pray for Luke. It's called Luke's Legacy, Pray for Luke Siegel on Facebook. We have over 70,000 followers.
Mm.
Team Luke Hope for Minds has a tremendous following as well. That I know that Luke's accident, although it is just so hard to fathom, because if the father was there, then we'd have the same discussion that you are having with yourself about the truck driver. But without Luke's accident, um, we would not be helping so many families each and every day. There's such a need, right, to help families. We see non-fatal drownings, car accidents, ATV, golf cart accidents at home, and we see them every day. And we're getting over 30 applications a month of people we're trying to help. Um, every 9 seconds is a brain injury among children. So I do feel like Luke's accident and your accident will continue to inspire, but also impact. And that's really what you're doing, Evan. You are making a tremendous impact all over the country. And I'm grateful that I've gotten the chance to know you. And I just know that everyone that gets in front of you, whether it's through a podcast or in person, is touched by your story for sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And yeah, each day it is a battle for me, but you're right. It is moving forward, finding that purpose, which I found, with the company, with this podcast, with the book, and getting those messages from time to time. And I love to see how successful your foundation is, and just the amount of people that you have impacted through your speaking engagements, and financial support. Uh, Last question I have for you is, if listeners walk away remembering anything or just one thing from Luke's story, what should it be?
Well, my first reaction is the number three. My son Luke loved the number three. And the football coach at Texas Tech, Joey McGuire, does not give out the number three anymore. It goes to the hardest worker and the greatest fighter in honor of my son. So
Mm.
you might forget my story, but now when you're driving and you're in the third parking lot of a parking area, or it's 3:33 in the afternoon, or your child came home and talked about something that happened because he is now wearing the jersey number 3. Maybe that will resonate with you. And there are 3 words that you can think about. And those words are fight like Luke. I've written 2 books. One is called It's in God's Hands. And I wrote the book, the title, because the doctor told me there's nothing else he could do for my son, but that it's in God's hands.
Mm.
The second book came out at the end of 2022, and it's called Fight Like Luke, Transforming Grief into Love, Strength, and Faith. And that book is a year in the life of a father losing his son. And I'm now in the early stages of writing a third and final book because I feel like I'm supposed to, because it's the third book. And so I think that's the message, that there's always something that I hold on to. Every single day I'm in the shower, when it's steaming, I write the number 3. I
Mm.
write the number 3. And because I want Luke to know that every time I think of that number 3, I think of a good thing. That Luke is in my heart. Luke is in everything that I do every single day. And I'm just so blessed, despite of what has happened to me. He was my only son, my little athlete, my little hero, my little buddy. And it is so difficult for me every day, but I have to keep going. I have to keep moving forward. There are days where I take 1 step forward and I take 2 steps back, but I am always moving with the idea of putting one foot in front of the other. I'm always knowing that there's somebody out there that knows my story, that reads my book, that listens to my podcast, Tuesdays with Tim, that somehow, some way is inspired and making an impact. And so for that reason, for those reasons, I can do nothing but move forward.
I love those optics. Truly inspiring, both as a survivor listening and my mom and other caregivers that are in my life to listen to this. It's the way you have spun this, dealt with so much loss in your life, which I'm deeply sorry for. But to see you turning the page, obviously continuing his legacy, but finding the good in life and helping others is remarkable. If there's families that are in need of help, what's the best way to contact your foundation or find means for that support?
You can go to teamlukehopeforminds.org and check out our website. And I don't even mind giving out my phone number, and you can share that as well to your listeners, because I think it's so important to talk to parents, because if you haven't been there, no one really gets it. No one really
Mhm.
understands. I have been there, and I saw improvement from my son. If there was no COVID, I am 100% convinced that Luke would be speaking to us today.
Mm.
And so I am just, despite what has happened to me, I do know that families out there don't ever give up hope. Your son, your daughter can make improvements. Every brain injury is different, but I've seen anoxic brain injuries where that child is now eating through mouth and speaking, and the brain can rewire. But the name of our organization, Team Luke, Hope for Minds. Hope for Minds is really what it's about, giving hope to families. And listen, there are dark days for sure, but lean on friends and family when you go through those dark days. Don't do things alone. Reach out. Always ask for help. Ask for help for your child. Don't be afraid to do that. And we, as an organization, can help. Whether it's financial or whether it's just talking to a parent, we're out there to help. And certainly our conference. If you go to our website, you can look at former speakers at our conference, and that's important to know what's out there to help your child. So, but I want to say this, Evan, what you're doing is tremendous. I look forward to reading your book. I'm just so blessed to be able to now have a new friend in my life that we can share our stories, and looking forward to seeing you soon when you come to Fort Worth.
Tim, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, for sharing Luke's story and inspiring all of us. His legacy will live on through Toro and Tides. And congratulations on the soon marriage. Keep kicking butt on the tennis courts. I'm happy to see you back on there. And again, just thank you for your friendship and for all the support you're doing for the brain injury community.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a good one.